You're watching News 24 and we are still at the IEC in Pretoria where results are slowly trickling in and it would seem that the dust is settling. Now we've got 70% of the districts that have been figured out and that we've got results for and less than 50% of the metros that we have results for. So things are changing, things are slipping, but we are here with political analyst Peter Kirkham, who's going to give us a little bit more insight into what's going on, the changing trends, so we can understand what it is that you made a decision on the polls. So thank you so much for joining us.
I just want to say that I hope I can provide you with the insight. It's still early days because, as you said, not all the results are in 50%, less than 50% of the metros. So it might be difficult to tell people what has happened, but let's try.
Let's try. Let's try and make sense of what we have at the moment. So if we speak about the metros, you mentioned that we don't have everything yet, and KZN particularly taking quite long to come in. Could you explain to us what's going on in that particular metro?
Yeah, that's a little bit of a mystery. You can ask all the political parties and they will tell you they don't know. But what we say, and sometimes you hear it's the weather. It was just complicated to do the job because of the weather complications that they had there. But I think it's just, some parties say that there are disagreements that have to be sorted out. It is a it's a densely populated province, even the city. So I think it's just a more complicated process. I don't think there's anything underhand happening. It will take a little bit of time. It's almost normal. But as far as the other metros are concerned, I think, by the way, the Northern Cape is done and dusted. They counted, and the ANC has done well. I think 57%. The DA around about 25%. Cope has lost most of its support. I think they're at 1.8%. So I think that more or less spells the end of Cope, especially as far as Northern Cape politics is concerned. But in Johannesburg, I think the ANC is just edging ahead. And then, of course, in Pretoria, Tshwane, it's very, very close. Too close to call. Lots of things can change. But I think as far as the patterns is concerned of the parties, I think by now the ANC must get a sniff of the fact that they're going to end up around about 55%, maybe 56% if they're doing well. Coming down from 63%, losing 8%. I think it's bad news for the party. The DA, on the other hand, not doing much better, 2.5%. So they have got perhaps some of the people that traditionally vote for the ANC has moved over to the DA, but not a lot of people. But even then, I think they will be disappointed that they didn't make 30. But still, they've done better than the past election. But the party that's the real surprise is the IFP.
Exactly, I was just about to bring that up. If we can see behind us here, we actually have the IFP coming before the EFF, which has actually been the people's kind of, charismatic character.
They had 4.7% now. They aim for 5%, and I think the polls predict that they might reach 5%. So I think for them it's a surprise. They didn't expect it. I think another party that might be disappointed is the Economic Freedom Fighters. They really, really wanted to reach that 10% threshold. There's a psychological advantage at going beyond 10%. In the same way as the DA aim for 30%. There's something psychological about it. And I think the poll says they might come at around about 8%, maybe just less, 7.9%. So they'll be disappointed, and it also creates the narrative that they might have reached a ceiling, and that they really, really don't want. Even though I think one must admit that local government elections are always difficult to fight for the smaller parties. You have less money, the distances are bigger, there are more war. It's just a more complicated process that you participate in. So the bigger parties will always have the benefit, and that's where they all usually, the opposition parties like the DA, they usually do better in local government elections than in national and provincial government elections.
Now, I mean, there were trends that were put out in the beginning before we started counting. And what are kind of the changes that we have? We may have predicted one thing in the beginning for the DA in particular. What are the surprises and the changes from the predictions that were put out in the beginning?
Look, I think the most important thing is most people predicted that it will be a high voter turnout. It was expected that it will be matched what you usually get in provincial and national elections, beyond 60%. Well, that hasn't happened. It's around about, I think we're aiming for around about 57%, which is exactly the same as we had, five years ago. The question there is, what has led to that lower turnout? And I think we've argued that point before. There is a degree of alienation amongst the ANC voters. We've seen that. That's why they will down about 8%. But there's also it's higher competition, more competition. The EFF is now suddenly part of the mix. They've never been there. The DA is significantly better organized. I think Musi Maimane has done a brilliant job in some other way, occupy the space that the ANC has occupied around around about 1994. So he has cashed in on the identity of Nelson Mandela. He has, he's built on that rhythm of reconciliation and those things. So I think he's occupied space. So he's done really, really well. I think he'll be disappointed they only got 2 or 3% more than in the previous election. So what I'm saying is, yes, the whole process is a lot more competitive, but there's also a lot of alienation happening, and specifically under, I think, the ANC voters, but also a little bit under the EFF voters.
So if you think about it, a lot of the time, there's been a lot of dissatisfaction in the lead up to, these elections. People have been talking about service delivery or lack thereof. And do you think that people crossing over either to the DA or even the IFP, for instance, is that kind of a punishment to the parties and the majority parties like the ANC, or rather that there's more of kind of faith in a new sense of policy? What is kind of driving, in your opinion, people to change over to someone else?
I think, for instance, the IFP, they got the benefit of the NFP not participating. So I think that some of the vote went to the IFP. But I honestly think the big enemy of the ANC was people who just stayed away from the election. I think, and that was almost a narrative. It was almost as if it was people threatened the ANC before the time. We will not participate. In Buvani, they, for instance, said, we're not going to vote. And they actually went to play soccer on that particular day. And I think that idea filtered through to many provinces and many areas, especially peri-urban areas where there were bad service delivery, high unemployment, all the things that people really want local government or government for that matter to address and to resolve. I think that was the burning points where there was a form of apathy setting in. And I think the ANC paid the biggest price of all parties for that, and the EFF perhaps also a little bit. Whereas I think the opposition parties, they can of course promise something that you can make promise you never have to keep. And I think the DA has done that. I think the EFF has done that. I think the PFP has done that. Or PFP, the IFP has done that. So I think it was easier for them to mobilize their own people. It was much more difficult for the ANC, who is fragmented, fractured. They really battle with the leadership problems. You'll remember that the Premier of Gauteng province, David Makura, actually said to the people, well, I know you have a problem with the president, but please come and vote for the party still. That type of message is not really conducive to a good turnout in the elections.
Absolutely. Now, I mean, if we think about it at this stage, what are the kind of chances? People speak of coalitions. People have gone to the polls now, and you can make big promises like we were talking about now. If you think about it now and kind of how closely contested these things are, what are the likelihoods that we're going to see coalitions really happen in spaces where the line is very small?
Listen, we've predicted that there will be a lot of coalitions. There are already 25 coalitions in South Africa, and there's going to be a lot more after this election. But this time we talked about coalitions in the metropoles, in the bigger areas. And let me tell you this, the EFF, they're licking their lips, because if you look carefully, you'll see that quite often in a number of these metros, they are really the only third party that the two bigger parties can go into a coalition with. In other words, it's not possible to form a coalition, and at least two of the metropoles, without the EFF. In Nelson Mandela, it might be different. I think it's quite possible for Bantu Lemisa's party to join up with the DA, and they will get the 50% plus one, because remember, you need a 50% plus one to form a coalition. In Johannesburg, even in Tshwane, it might be very difficult. We don't know where Tshwane is going. It could be close if there's a 1 or 2% difference, which they are at now, and it might vary and polarize a little bit near the end. But if there's a 1 or 2% difference, one of the smaller parties can come in through the back door. But if there's a 5 and a 6%, then it's only the AFF that is really a candidate for a coalition for both of these parties. So I can imagine that the DA and the ANC tonight, they will also have a little bit of a discussion and say, what will we take to the EFF, and what will the EFF ask from us in terms of sacrifices, in terms of authority, power and money to be part of a coalition, because not being in government is a horrible experience for the ruling party, and it's something that the DA, they really crave, they really desperately want another metropole to govern, to show that they can duplicate what they do in a metropole that's often accused of being high socioeconomic status, white homeland type of politics. I think they want to duplicate something that's typical South African, somewhere else, to show that there's a party can govern well under all circumstances and conditions.
All right. Well, we can tell that things are very difficult to tell at the moment. We'll just have to watch what the parties do. But of course, we'd love to hear from you. So tell us what you think in the comment section below. And of course, keep watching News 24.